majority of people around the world, they have different entry points into these things. Ayahuasca has become such a popular thing. Everybody's expert on it these days, but I think we need to be very humble, go very, very slow with what we think we know. I saw the world of illusion illumined by the light behind the veil. I felt the presence of the stars. They shook me and they took me away. I saw the world filled with light, and that is now guiding my way.
Hi everyone, welcome to another long-awaited episode of the Wolf Portal podcast. I'm your host, Janoon Ocean, or as many know me by, Wolfie, here to usher you into this very special episode of the Wolf Portal. What to say about this episode? What to say? I feel like it's not a really common thing to, maybe in this day and age it is, but to be able to sit down and have a conversation with a real life mystic, possible ascended master in our day and age. And that's what I got to do. People from all around the world come to see and come to sit with Jaya and his beautiful goddess of a wife, Haley, from the Forest Path. And I was lucky enough to first sit with them in 2021. I believe that it was, in Guatemala, and since then I've gotten to share countless precious, beautiful moments rooted in prayer and love and community and singing and song and music and dance and nature and wow. Yeah, and I was lucky enough to get to have a conversation with Jaya where he will share countless pure nuggets of golden wisdom is really all I can call them. Pure nuggets of golden wisdom is really all I can call them. Like I said, people come from all around the world to sit in ceremony and to learn from Jaya and the other wonderful teachers of the Forest Path, and to sing with his beautiful wife Haley. And over the years, I've come to grow really, really fond, slightly obsessed with, and just fascinated with everything that the Forest Path is and what these teachings offer. Actually, here's an idea. I thought maybe it would be nice to read a little excerpt, call it that, from my journal. All right, so I wrote this journal entry after a Forest Path ceremony. Last night was nothing short of spectacular, magical, undeniable, the healing and alchemy of love that took place in this temple. If I could answer the question that has been haunting me over the past months, was it worth it to come? Not only worth it, foundational, destined, written. If I could whisper something of encouragement to my sweet past self, I would say, be brave and see how you are received and rewarded. The knots of my being that were so tightly wound up and twisted have been pulled loose, smoothed out, and woven into a greater tapestry of harmony with the universe. What a gift. What a blessing to sing these songs with family, to share this medicine with my love. When my container is stretched, it gives way to deeper unfurling of myself into my being. Remembrance, invoking, ancestral, witnessing, stillness, presence, devotion, evoking within me that doesn't have a name. That can only be spoken of in circles, touched with songs and dance, praised in the depth of communion with the astral garden that reverberates through eternity. I have found my soul family. Corny, but hey, what are you gonna do? Fresh out of ceremony thoughts, And I have discovered my willingness and purpose to do this work. I moved mountains and found the mountain within myself. Maybe we'll edit that part out. Holy of holy, Wakandanka, I vow to sing of you and the way that I walk through this life. Divine Mother, I promise to honor you in my way of being gods and goddesses of creation. I give my unwavering force of love to the altar of your grace. I think I wrote Om Shiva Asi at the end of that. Those words come from the kind of state that you are delivered into through these ceremonies. And it was in Guatemala. Jaya is an author. He's a mystic. He's a contemplative. He's a teacher. He's a father. He's a husband. He's somewhat of a comedian, which if you've sat in ceremony with Jaya, and what else? They're deeply, deeply talented musicians. And the gifts that they share with this world are just truly infinite. There was a time that I was contemplating or wondering if magic is real. All I can say is that after meeting the forest path, not really a question anymore. I've been lucky enough to conversate with Jaya, to witness how they walk through this life, and to be inspired by that. Yeah, one of the things that Jaya says in this podcast is something along the lines of ceremony isn't anything really that's like new, or special. It's just when people come together to pray, when people come together to love. And that is just my favorites. To me, one of the most precious activities that we can participate in this life. I'm grateful for the remembering that his words instill, that these ceremonies give way to. I'm grateful for the impeccability of Jaya and the Forest Path's service on this beautiful path. And the way that they weave their medicine is nothing short of incredible. So, yeah, without further ado, I think we'll just get into it. And whether or not you know Jaya or anyone from the Forest Path personally, you're in for a treat, a real treat, because like I said earlier, it's not often that you get to sit down and do a podcast with an enlightened teacher, an ascended master. I know that Jaya probably would hate it. So without further ado, enjoy this beautiful, potent trip of an episode of the Wolf Portal podcast. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and if you're curious to know more about Jaya, to maybe check out some of his books or some of what the Forest Path has to offer, feel free to click the links below. Thanks for watching. Bye. I'm here at the lake with a very special guest. I'm here with Jaya of the Forest Path of Lake Atitlán. And Jaya, you are one of the most incredible humans I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. One of the greatest teachers I've ever had. And just an amazing person, amazing father. And I'm very honored to be able to step into the Wolf Portal with you.
Thank you.
Actually, to start, I was wondering if you could maybe say a little prayer for kind of setting the space, but also one that the listeners will be able to resonate with.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the listeners. I really like to go back to listening a lot, to the point when we listen, we notice that we become very present, naturally, effortlessly, just by placing attention at the ears. Notice that when we listen, when we place that attention there, the body starts to become present as well. We start to listen with the whole body. And listening is a really, really wonderful direct access point to this presence that is quite profound. It's quite profound, because when you listen purely and intently, all of the thoughts, they kind of disappear. And even if they come, you listen to them. And that's very important, because until we listen to them, we are lost in them. And so to begin with the practice of deep listening is to peel back the layers until we can't peel back anymore, until there's just a place of awareness, aware presence. And from that vantage point, everything else is on top, like paint on a canvas. And if we're unaware of that canvas, we are caught up in the colors and the content, which is very beautiful. But practice of deep listening and deep presence takes us back to what is essential, our essential nature, before ideas, opinions, ideologies, before beliefs, before names, before forms, before all of the story. So I want to begin like that, from a place of deep, pure, clean listening, clarity, presence. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. That actually brought me back to, well, this last weekend, we sat in ceremony. So we're coming out of that now. And it was interesting, in the ceremony, I became like hyper aware of all of my thoughts. And it was funny because they really felt like kind of like flies, like bugs, just like swarming around. And I would be so lost in them. And when I was so lost in them, that's when it would be the toughest. And when I was just able to find my center and become clear, that's when, you know, like you said, like I could actually be present to what was going on. But also that's when the medicine seemed to open up. Which was a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, there's often an interplay between what we could call our little self and our bigger self. For most people, we're caught up in the general day-to-day neuroses of our thoughts. We believe them. We think that that's us. That is who we are. We identify with it. You know, that the voice in our head is us speaking to ourselves. It's nice that you started off there, because we hinted that in the beginning with this, you know, presencing and listening. That just by the fact of listening to those thoughts, or hearing them or seeing them objectively, like flies buzzing around, you disentangle yourself from them. And so it's a little awakening in and of itself, because when we are led endlessly by that, we are kind of asleep. We're kind of lost.
Yeah. And I was quite caught up in my thoughts for a while leading up into being here. And I don't want to use the word blame, but I do recognize that, like, the fault there is mine, because I really haven't been keeping up with the practice of meditating and doing the things that I know that I need to do to bring me to that place of inner stillness, you know. And it's a dangerous thing, getting so caught up in life that I'm like, oh, just wake up, hear the alarm, wake up, jump out of bed, go straight into the day, you know. And then, that's kind of getting all tangled up in all my thoughts, and then and then losing touch with reality. Really, just it just kind of happens. But it's been a beautiful gift that I've been able to take with me from the ceremony, of feeling this clarity and feeling this, like, just presence, and being able to watch my thoughts and hear them as they come. You used the best analogy I think I've ever heard before the second ceremony the other day, which was saying that all of the neuroses and thoughts are like gangsters, And so I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Well, first of all, you said a really good word, recognition. So it's not really, I just want to go back a little bit. Not necessarily, there's not a need to blame ourselves for not practicing enough or keeping up or diligence or something like this. Because it can be really simple, can be really little. Just to recognize. When you recognize, you come into the realization of the thing. And that doesn't need to, go on all these different retreats and drink ayahuasca and do this and wake up and do a practice. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to beat yourself up about it. It's just these little moments of recognition that start to flip the script from believing one thing to watching a belief. Mm-hmm. And so when you say, when you notice that you're tangled up in it, like, what, I'd always like to think, what is aware that there is an entanglement, or what recognizes that you're not aware is aware, and what recognizes that you are entangled is not tangled. And that's a really, really fine thing and a really, really wonderful thing to highlight, because if you're not, as soon as you're aware of that, you're free of that. And unless you do, you keep identifying with the thing, and then you blame and beat yourself up and say, I should have done this and this and this and this. But it's actually just a really simple recognition is the word used. And it's just a recognition. The thoughts we believe in our head, like gangsters, I don't remember saying that, but it sounds right. It's like when we get lost in the limiting self-talk that we have for ourselves, it's like those old flavors, patterns, or habits, they pull us into their territory. And in their territory, they're stronger than us. In their neighborhood, they know their way around. And a lot of people we all have these voices inside of us. We all have this voice inside of our head to varying degrees, that we listen to it, that we recognize it, or that we want to get rid of it, or that we want to transform it, or that it's more positive or more negative. But a lot of people I see, and when we are doing this work, sometimes it illuminates these shadow areas in the mind, and you get taken into those neighborhoods. And I like to think, like when you're dealing with that, or you're dealing with addiction or habit or patterns or loops that you're spiraling into, it's like you have to make your strength stronger than your weakness, because sometimes your weaknesses become so strong, your vices left unchecked, that once they pull you into your neighborhood, you don't stand a chance, because they've been working out and they know you really, really well. So I think the invitation was like a call to action, a call to duty, a call to presence, which was understanding the neighborhood of presence and awareness and just staying there. It's the neighborhood of the heart, and it's the neighborhood of clarity, the neighborhood of truth, and saying to those vices and those voices inside of us, if you want me, I'm here. You're very welcome. You can come and find me here, because I'm not going to your hood anymore. I'm going to stay in my heart, and you're very, very welcome here. Because sometimes we neglect and we push them away. We don't want it to be there. I'm talking about suffering in all of its, in all of the ways that it shows up. The majority of time, people push it away. We run away. They say, what you run from chases after you. And what you push back on, what you push on, pushes back twice as hard. And so generally our intuitive response is to push and to run away, because there's a negative thing, there's suffering, there's pain, there's anguish, there's anxiety, and we want to get rid of it. It's normal. And so the invitation is rather than push it away, just let it be. Say, oh, there it is. There's anxiety. Okay, what does it feel like? And track it, sense it in my body. And rather than get caught up in the story of it, like the biography that perpetuates identity, and say, well, it's because of this and because my mother, my father, now da. But just tracking, saying, okay, is it hot? Is it cold? Which part of my body is it? And we start to disentangle through just biology, like biological response, tracking sensation. And from there, when we're disentangled, That's what I say. You stay in the heart and you stay present, and it's really, really that simple. It's just going back to that simple recognition of awareness, and you say, okay, here I can let it be, and I can allow it, and I can accept it, and I don't have to fix it. I don't have to fear it. I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to fidget with it. I don't have to be a victim to it. I don't have to blame it. I don't have to shame it. I don't have to believe it. I can just be here and hold it in that place of presence and in that space. It doesn't even have to be a space of love, and joy, It's just simple presence. Because in that place, there's such a vast capacity that can hold all of the pain and all of the suffering and all of the anguish and let it be. And that's one of the best ways in my book that will transform something, is to let it be. Because as soon as we have an agenda that it needs to be something else or somewhere else, or that we need to be something else or someone else, we're in conflict, we're in tension, and that tension just gets stronger and stronger. It starts to tie knots in our mind, knots in our body. And I believe the whole spiritual path is about untying these knots. And so if you stay in that presence, it has a capacity to hold any flavor of suffering. It's compassion, it's forgiveness, it's love. But if we stay in our suffering, it's very hard to find these divine qualities, because where there's a translation of a quote by the poet Hafiz. He says, complaint is only necessary in the suburbs of God. And so when you're on the outskirts, you feel very far away. But if you stay close to the city of light, close to the city of truth, close to the city of God, it's hard to get tangled up in these things, because it's the place of the untangling.
Yeah. Really powerful stuff, and really grounded too, and really simple. I found in the beginning of my awakening journey, with all of these practices and just with the path of spirituality, it's so easy to want to do all the meditations and learn all of the things and just kind of get all the crystals and go up, and yeah, looking back, that kind of led to a really ungrounded spirituality. And then it's just been an interesting journey, because just throughout the process, and seeing other people in their journeys and being in different communities, the whole ungrounded spirituality, it runs a little rampant sometimes. And actually, before I came to the Illumination retreat last year, I kind of found myself fed up in a way. Just kind of almost, just fed up with the whole spiritual community, and it felt a little bit inflated. And what's so beautiful about the forest path and the way that you teach and these things are that it's so grounded, and has this quality of purity of intention and realness, tangibility. And so I wonder if you could talk about some of those parallels.
Yeah, I like to think of sober spirituality. A lot of people, even though we specialize in psychedelic-assisted therapies and plant medicine ceremonies and the traditional kind of practices, sober spirituality is you're not looking to get somewhere. You're not looking to get high. You're not looking to achieve some certain form of state, because I believe spirituality is actually very ordinary. It's simplicity. It's right in front of you, because it is reality, and there's not a separation from that. And anytime we have a spirituality that is seeking something other than reality, we're lost in the illusion. We are deluded. And so, for me, I've lived in kind of places that attract a lot of spiritual tourism and things like this, and so I've been jaded and disenfranchised, you could say, something similar to what you're saying, that it seems like a bit of a show. There's performative aspects, spiritual materialism, spiritual paraphernalia, and you need this and this and this, and it's this never-ending wheel that has kind of been hijacked by capitalist ideology in a spiritual guise, like a wolf in sheep's clothing. But I grew up in that. I say that I was indoctrinated in the cult of the New Age as a child, you know,
Really?
with my mother, you know. Yeah. So I know what that taught me was to have more of a critical eye and more skepticism, like a healthy skepticism, to look for spirituality that is sober and grounded and ordinary, because I grew up with all sorts of things. I was very comfortable in these sorts of environments. I say the cult of the New Age because in those things in the Western world, there's a lot of gullibility. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen, you know, this crystal for that, and this reading for that, and people trying to tell your future and channel aliens and all sorts of things. And so I rebelled against that. I wanted to get really far away from that. And that led me to appreciate more traditional approaches, you know, to be more of an appreciator of the world religions, like comparative religions and the mystic and contemplative ideals in humanity's culture.
What did that rebellion look like for you? There's actually a picture of you that Mark showed me. He was looking on the Forest Path website, and it's of you meditating as a child. It's so sweet. So I was curious, about your backstory, and it's interesting to know that you came into the world in this cult of the New Age with all of its gifts and its lessons. What did it look like for you, kind of waking up from that, or becoming aware of it, and how did rebelling against that look for you?
Yeah, so growing up exposed to those things at impressionable ages, you know, it does something. Whereas a lot of people I see, they're just, you know, beginning their journey, or they're doing this. And in the places where we live, we get a lot of young people who are just finding themselves, expressing themselves, and having big openings. And a problem with that is when people have initial big openings, they think they've figured it out. Things are aligning up, you know, there's synchronicities and things falling into place and meaning making happening. And they think they have all the answers, and they think they've got the thing. And I say that, you know, spirituality doesn't really begin until you fall from the clouds after that awakening and hit the ground and eat the dirt and go through all the suffering and all the pain again, because it's still there.
Yeah.
And that's just the first iteration. It continues and continues. And so it's, I say, like this, disenfranchised aspect, or this seeking sober spirituality, because, you know, in my own way, seeing so many different iterations and so many different approaches and so many different people. It's like there's not much out there in the spiritual landscape, the spiritual materialist landscape, that is on offer, that, you know, I don't know, at the heart of it, people are seeking, and that seeking can lead us down all sorts of roads, you know, especially when we're trying to get something, especially when we're trying to cure our suffering.
Right.
As a young person, my rebellion, just like any young person, was against society. It was against the stream. You know, drugs, alcohol, rock and roll.
Wow.
Just rebellion. You know, I was a wild child. I didn't really, as a teenager, I didn't think I would do much or live for a very long time. I threw it all to the wind. And in the back of my mind, having been exposed to so much different spiritual paths, I knew that there was always something better. And so the groups of friends in the areas that I was in at the time, the suffering was compounding, and my way of dealing with that was again to rebel against that. And so I separated from that. I moved away, and to somewhere where nobody knew me, and I could just concentrate on my health and practice, and to just experiment, to flip the negative back into a positive. But the rebellion was still there, so much so that I completely abandoned the Western world, and I moved to India. And I've basically never been home, and I mean that in the sense that some people who have mystical inclinations or monastic inclinations, who have a religious side to them, there is sometimes a natural pull to monasticism, natural pull to renunciation. And I had that really deeply. And so I kind of got rid of everything, and I just had a backpack in this world, and that was it. And from India to Central and South America, mostly living in ashrams.
Wow.
And the reason I bring that up was because after that rebellion, the way that I exercised myself outside of Western, like I excommunicated myself from Western culture so much that I thought I'd never be able to integrate again. And when somebody makes reckless, very reckless, it sounds dreamy and stuff like that, it was completely naive and reckless.
Right.
And somewhat misguided, but luckily worked out somehow. But when somebody makes certain pacts or vows of renunciation or commitments on a spiritual path, things really, really fall away. And so it was like there were identities and personalities in me that were severed and killed. And like when I moved to India without really having a past or a future in mind, something in my psychology kind of disappeared and never came back. And that's something that's hard to translate other than people who have taken monastic vows or gone into an ashram for a long period of time, or because we always have a sort of a slight inkling of what the future will be, or like we're planning this or planning that, and to come face to face with death and actually like give up the future, it changes somebody, And in all the world's wisdom traditions, there's a deep contemplation of death, and the core mendicants of those traditions, they try to live very close to that place. And so I think as a young person in my early 20s, I brought myself very, very close to that, to the point where we could say I was born again.
Wow. On the subject of death and rebirth and creation, I wonder if you could talk about how, because talking to you and listening to you, learning from you, it's crazy. It's like interesting, because I've also talked to other people, who have sat with you, and it's like listening to somebody who's been around for like hundreds of years. I wonder if you could talk about some of the more powerful teachings that you learned along the way. And maybe we could start with like some of the myths or stories of creation, of the earth, the universe.
Well, first of all, I've thought these last years that my mother was my first spiritual teacher because of the exposure that she gave me. When I was young, she had a catchphrase. I don't know where she got it from, but she says, "Wisdom doesn't come with age." And so she endowed me with wisdom to be a wise person from a young age. And so I always have this conundrum: what came first, the chicken or the egg? Am I wise, or am I wise because my caregiver spoke to me as an equal and cherished me as a spiritual person? Because she was going through her spiritual awakening when around the time she was pregnant with me, and making moves towards divorce from my father and things like this. I'm the youngest, so my older siblings have a different approach to life, because I was there when my mother was going through these motions chemically with me. But when I was born, one of her friends, a psychic, works for the police force, that type of thing. And she said something to my mother, which it's part of this complex that I have. She said, "This is not your son, this is your spiritual teacher." So then my mother said, "Well, wisdom doesn't come with age."
Wow.
And so she would treat me, I was still her son, I was still a boy, but then there was another side where she had a different feeling for me. And I think, I'm not sure, is that real, or is it real because in a young person receiving that from an elder is a wonderful gift. So either way, it doesn't really matter, it is what it is. I say wisdom doesn't come with age. Oh, no, sorry, there is wisdom that comes with age, and there's wisdom that is ageless. And so it's the ageless wisdom that has always fascinated me. And so in that sense, when you say, some people, or you feel it seems like it's been around for hundreds of years, it's to point to the ageless inside of us all, the timeless space. And if we spend enough time in the timeless, it has an effect on us. If you consider the timeless, it doesn't have an edge, it doesn't have a boundary. And that's also my way of relating to the essence or to the source of where everything is emanating from, to kind of go back to your question. This is the contemplation of eternity. It's to look at what can't be seen. It's to hear the silence. To me, the quality of eternity has three aspects. It's stillness, it's silence, and it's spaciousness. So if we take ourselves way back before time and space, were emerging, before the universe was combusting and arising, there are qualities like this. In the East, we say that there is nirguna and saguna. There's with quality and without quality. And so when, as a human being, we give descriptions to what we could call God or the divine, or any name you want to name the nameless, we're giving human descriptions, qualities, and endowments. But then the closer we come to truth, we have to come to what is without qualities, without attributes. And that's very hard to speak about with words. Right. So when we go to this place, with words, we're always doing it an injustice, because words can never do it justice. However, every word is its word. When we talk about the word of God, there is no word that is not the word of God. In my book, it's like when you make an offering, you're making an offering of God to God. Like there's no separation in my book, because when you go all the way back, it pollinates through everything. I say in the beginning there was one thing. It was like a singular thing. And then as we move out to all of this, that one thing, it's a contemplation. That one thing is not just in everything, which is a lot of people, we want to say, love is in everybody, light is in everybody, God is in everything, God is in the wind, in the grass, in the trees. But I'd say that one thing is not just in everything, it is everything. And that's the sort of monism that I follow, that there is only God. There is nothing outside of God. And if you really want to reconcile that idea of oneness, idea of one reality, then all of your opinions, all of your ideas, all of your descriptions, and everything that you think about yourself, including yourself, has to come in the firing line of that. And so that comes back to the place of sacrifice, the place of offering, the place of renunciation, because the renunciate sees that there is no being of themselves other than the being of God. And so a lot of that path and task is to close the book on our story so that we can become more like reality, because all of our stories about reality take us away from reality. Right. And so I was saying the qualities of that place, of that space, when he says the placeless, are stillness, meaning that it doesn't matter how much time passes, the timeless doesn't move. And if you can go back and find that timeless place that is pure stillness, you'll see that from the beginning movements of the universe, the Big Bang, all of everything that's moving right today, here and now, it is informed by that stillness. So you could say that all movement moves with that stillness, or at the heart of that stillness. That stillness is at the heart of all movement. That every dance is the movement of that. And if you go back to that place, there is supreme silence. And then if you come back to come forward to where we are today, every single sound, word, every noise is informed by that silence. It is the voice of that silence. And then the other quality, I say, is spaciousness, not space as in measured distance, but spaciousness that is immeasurable, that has no circumference. If it has no circumference, it has no center. If it has no center, then its center is found everywhere in everything. And when we close our eyes, there is that spaciousness. When we feel sensation in our body, there is that spaciousness. That space is another name for God, because the space inside of you is the same space inside of me, and it is the space between us. And there's nowhere that we can go to escape that stillness, that silence, and that spaciousness, because everywhere we go, we're inside of it, and everywhere we go, it is inside of us. And so what I'm saying is that everything else is a story about that, Mm-hmm. And when we come back to what is essential, that is at the heart of everything. And the trip I wanted to just take us on is we're going back to before time and space, this timeless, placeless, still, silent essence. And when we come forward through time to here and now, we see that it hasn't changed. It is the same. And so I'm speaking to the way that we relate to it, the way we interact with it, and the way we commune with it is presence. Mm. And so the presence that you feel is, what we could say is the practice of the presence of God. It's not the practice of going back before the Big Bang, because that space is here and now. It hasn't left. It's the same space. Wow. So that's my cosmology. It's non-dual. And in the non-dual teachings, it just means that there is no separation. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is one thing, and it's not a thing, and it's not an action. It's a being. It's a presence. Right. But then we have a dichotomy where everything is a multiplicity as well. Right. But for me, I always want to come back to the essence where things are not separate, and that is what informs the heart of most of the teachings here. Yeah, it's really beautiful. It's like interesting how throughout time there's been this sort of, like you said, I don't know the word for it, anthropomorphization, like of like trying to make the thing God, like human, like give it our characteristics, or even like just to speak about it, because it's something that can't be spoken about. It can only be witnessed and felt. But then again, I'm so thankful for all of the masters and wisdom traditions, and how you spoke of the other day, towards the end of ceremony in the temples, the chanting and the singing that's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful for all of the teachers who came close enough to it to know it, and shared that with us, because I don't know where I'd be without that. It makes me think about how when we're talking about like cosmology, and people who meditated and came to this place, came to this point, and all of these things to carry these teachings like throughout time. It makes me wonder, like the day and age that we live in now, how in a lot of places, not necessarily here, but in a lot of places, it's like go, go, go. And, people say things like, back in the day, there was no Netflix, there was no, like all these distractions that we have now, that kind of take us away from that. It makes me wonder about where we're going if we can't take that time to sit in the silence and sit in communion with that. And it also makes me think of this massive realization that I also had in ceremony this weekend of why, because I was at a point where, and I always kind of circle around and around this thing of being like, I don't know, like, I know it's real, I know that I'm called to all of these things for a reason. And I know that I want to walk through this life like this for a reason as well. But then I also get to these points where I'm like, maybe it doesn't really matter. Like, why am I so hyper fixated on this? Maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe why am I even doing this ecstatic mysticism? Why am I going to sit in ceremony, like you said? I realize what it does for me, and what it does for the world.
which is much bigger, because like in Buddhism, they talk a lot about suffering. And I always think about it on like the micro level, but also the macro level. And it's like that saying that's like, if you want to see a change outside in the world, then make the change in yourself first. But I wonder if you can talk about that, the role that suffering plays and does play at a micro level, like inside of us, but also the role of suffering that is playing out in the world right now, and how what do we do with it? What is it teaching us?
What is born out of suffering is compassion. Compassion is this word con with passion, biblical reference to the word suffering, like the sufferings of Christ. So compassion is our ability to be with suffering. In the Buddhist sense, it seems like there's a lot of discourse on suffering, and that is because we are subject to birth, sickness, old age, and death. And if you are subject to any one of those four things, there's going to be difficulty. There's going to be things that you'll suffer with.
Yeah, right.
So it's very simplistic. But also the word dukkha, which is suffering in Buddhism, it is more aptly translated as like dissatisfaction. Like there's something inside of us that
gnawing feeling.
Yeah. It wants something. It's not content to sit still and appreciate the silence all of the time. It's craving. It's always, trying to cling to something and hold it closer or push something away.
It's like that thing that Ram Dass talks about when he's like, well, I'm bored, so I'll go see a movie. Yeah. And I'm so happy to see the movie, but now the movie's over. Or it's not even over yet, but it's going to be over soon, so what can I do as soon as it's over? Maybe I'll go get ice cream. But, okay, the ice cream's over now. I'm after the ice cream. Like, that feeling of wanting more. Right. And when is it enough?
Yeah, so a dissatisfaction is a never enoughness. If you're enough, then it's contentment. It's and then that breeds peace. It breeds tranquility. It breeds
santosha.
Yeah, all these beautiful things, which I think really everybody's trying to look for, some kind of peace, some kind of happiness, some kind of joy, where they can stop running away from pain and stop trying to find their salvation everywhere else. And it's like the longer we chase happiness, the more it evades us. If we want peace, we have to stand still and let it come and find us. And so a lot of that suffering in our tradition, they say it's based on that pull and push, the craving and aversion, and that perpetuates our identity. You learn very, very young when you touch a hot stove, it's hot. You don't like that. You won't do that again. When you touch ice cream to your tongue and the sugar hits you, you say, I like that. I want to do that more. And so it's the way some of our chemistry works. Preferences and likes, dislikes, and desires, and it sort of starts to build the database, the mainframe of what our personality is that we represent and then show to the world. I'm the type of person that likes this and doesn't like this. It's what social media is like, our page is based on, we like the things we like. And so then we start to funnel ourselves into sort of echo chambers and worldviews and realities that are very far from reality. But suffering in the world is also immense. There are some people that say, I don't understand Buddhism because it's just based on suffering. But we can all agree that if you're subject to those four things and then you look at it through this other lens of just simple dissatisfaction in life, that it's always there. It's driving us unconsciously, and until we take the steering wheel, we never really know. And so that suffering, it kind of haunts us. Like you were saying, like, why am I doing this? Why am I studying ecstatic mysticism? It's I always put it back to the question of when it comes to healing work or contemplative study, there's something people who are called to that. It's something you cannot not do, and quite often the opposite is more painful.
Yeah, you said that. You said that this weekend, and it really hit. It really did.
Yeah. So you think drinking ayahuasca is hard? It's hard, but not looking at those difficult things, it's like ignorance is bliss. You go 10, 15 years not looking at it, but then the person that you become, I don't know if you want that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the suffering in the world on a macro level, I don't know myself sometimes. Sometimes it's so hard to bear. I sometimes get some kind of an epiphany that's beyond my human mind in what I would feel is like the Christian sense, where it's happening for us, It's a part of the catalyst of transformation to draw us towards something. And I would prefer to sit on that side of the fence and have faith and say that the darkness is arising to draw us towards the light. That one points to the other, that saying where I say, when you see your own shadow, don't be afraid, because the light has your back. Because it takes something in the way of the light to cause a shadow. And so I'd rather sit on that side of the fence that has a hopeful outlook. One of my roles, I guess, in our work is we call it a wisdom keeper, a keeper of faith, a keeper of the peace. And that means my role is to not lose sight. A lot of the paths that people take, they're directional. I say it doesn't matter what you choose to believe or spiritual path you believe, as long as it's lifting your sight to the highest sight possible, and then you're orienting your compass, your North Star to that, and you're fixed on that, so that every time your gaze drops and you fall down, you stand up and you're still going in a good direction. And so I want to fix and help people steady their sight towards that, whatever that is, however they interpret it. Because it's very, very easy to look out at the world and see no hope, and see no faith, and see no certainty, and see devastation everywhere. And that's true. And there's so much atrocity, there's so much injustice. But we also have to be very, very aware of the battleground within us as individuals. Like, I might not be able to go and save nations and fix poverty, and I don't, do all the things that we wish that we could do, we wish the world was without. But I believe that every war on earth started in the mind of an individual, starts in the minds of individuals. It's an infection, it's a disease. And so I know that maybe I can't solve wars and geopolitical difficulties, but I can find peace in my mind, the battlefield of my mind. I can end the war in myself. I can put down the weapons that I use myself and others. And if everybody does a little bit towards that, then we'll be moving in a little bit more of a better direction that is more compassionate towards ourselves and towards others. And so it's the internal battle that I see in the world, and a lot of the internal battle out in the world is inherited. It's an infection that is hereditary. That's what we say about the generational trauma and things like this. That it continues to play and continues to act out, and it continues to infect, and it continues to poison until we wake up from those cycles, until we be the change.
You talk about this thing that is us wondering about our ancestors and where we came from and all of these things. But if we look back far enough, then we'll know where we came from, which is a long line of humanity. And the work that you do and everything that you bring forth it's really like sharing the story of humanity in such a powerful and beautiful way. And sitting in ceremony with you guys is just It's beautiful how you weave together all of these teachings and all of this, and the way that you hold the space is just really impeccable. Like, that's the word that I always use when I'm describing you guys. Quality of impeccability that's beautiful to witness and really inspiring. Could you talk about impeccability and ceremony? Well, first, what does ceremony mean to you? And what is the evolution of the role that it's played in your life?
Sometimes these things are alien to people, or they prefer it one way and think another way is wrong and stuff like this. I think people coming together to pray, to concentrate their minds, to meditate, to sing, to do whatever it is involved in their ritual is a positive thing. And like you say, in tracing back roots, it's something that we've always done. It's not something new or interesting or niche or quirky. Like we are social beings, and praise, ritual, religion, philosophy, these sort of undertakings are at the heart of humanity. We've always looked for something more. We don't know how we ended up here. It's like the birds of the sky have birds have the sky, and the human son of man has no place to lay his head. Is that quote? And so we've always somewhat of an awkward place. We're like fumbling around here. We don't know what to do on the earth. And so we have these long-standing traditions and religions that are trying to shepherd people and trying to organize people into good ways. I always think that that's a noble cause. For me, I kind of I see syncretism, and I follow syncretic schools, which means places where different faiths overlap, different spiritual disciplines overlap without quarrel, without conflict. Some people, it's like we have to choose one path. You follow the path of your parents, or you choose one path. You get ordained in a certain thing, and that's your study, and that's really, really wise. That's how it works. A lot of times, there's the old story of somebody looking for water, and they dig a 1 meter well and they don't find it. They dig another one. They dig 20 1-meter wells and they don't find water, and all they have to do is dig one 20-meter well.
Wow.
So it's always good for somebody to find what works for them and stick to it and follow that through. And then some of us, we can be like faith fluid or personality fluid. We can move through different things. And I always feel that way, that I'm like a middleman. It's like in some places that I go to practice some traditions, they assume I'm from that other place. But I go to the other place, they assume I'm from there. I go from here, they assume I'm there, But it doesn't matter. Anywhere where somebody's praying, I can feel at home. And it took me a while to realize that not everybody understands that right from the get-go, because we've been taught that to be a traditional person, you should stick with the one thing and do the one thing. But for me, it's the idea of mysticism is to get as close as you can to the fountain of wisdom, to the source, rather than the trickles down from other people to the waterfalls and streams everywhere else. The idea is to have the direct relationship. And that's what it's really about. And to get there, we have to, swim through a bunch of different things, for sure. The other analogy is like the rays of the sun. You could say that all of the paths are all of the rays, we're starting from way out in the darkness, and all of if we're lucky enough to find one of those paths, one of those rays of light, it's leading to the light. But as you set out, somebody walking on another ray of light, they're very far away, and you could judge all of the differences and, say that they're doing it wrong, da-da-da-da-da. But if you're, content on your journey, the closer you get, the more similarities you have. And if you make it to the direct realization or experience place of that big light, then you see that all of the rays are just the same thing. It's all the same light. It doesn't matter which language it was spoken in. If they met like the other night, God is infinite, so there are infinite ways to approach them. Therefore, we shouldn't shun anybody for their version of it. This to me is just really, really sad to see that people still quarrel over all of these things.
Yeah, whole wars have been fought over it, right?
Yeah.
And it just makes so much sense to me, drawing from all of the different wisdom traditions. It's like that parable about the elephant, where there's a bunch of blindfolded men touching the elephant, and one of them is touching the ear, and they're like, this is a fan. And the other one's touching the leg, and he's like, it's a tree. And the other one's touching the tail, and he's like, no, it's a rope. What are you guys talking about? You know?
Yeah.
But they're all touching the same thing, but they don't really realize what it is. Yeah.
And so the wisdom there is right from the beginning, to see that we don't know it all. We can't see the whole thing. And that's beginning in a place of humility. That's beginning in a place of not knowing, you know, always trying to know more, to get the whole thing, to read as much as we can, to do all the practice, do all the things. But the greatest masters have always spoken about the unknown and said that we have to go closer to the unknown. And we have to give away all that we know. You know, we have to burn all of our books. You know? We have to become empty. You know, we have to face the mystery, and that's something that we can't read from somewhere. Nobody can tell us how to do it. It's a path nobody can walk for us.
Right.
And so there's a humility right in the beginning to accept our ignorance, to accept the things that we cannot know and that we cannot change. And that's the beginning of wisdom. It's putting down the thing inside of us that wants to compete and compare and wish we were somewhere else, or up here, up there. And so I guess in my ministry, or in our ceremony, there's an encouragement of zooming out, to hold a lot. It's like I always say, I won't tell you what to believe, but I'll tell you to look at your beliefs, because they inform your reality. And not to say that they're bad, but to say that reality is good, and you want to know, come as close to the pure thing as possible. And so in our rituals, there is syncretism. There's space for many things to be held without conflict. There's an interfaith dialogue, because I come from an interfaith perspective. I come from the lineage of wisdom, of poets, of mystics, of contemplative people who have sought holy roads. And it's not unique. It's not so rare. It's the call to study. It's the call to learning. It's the call to inquiry. It's the call closer to awakening to who we really are. And so when you ask about ceremony, it's not an exotic thing. It's not a borrowed thing. It's not an appropriated thing. You know, when we talk about tradition, and we think that it's stagnant, it's not even that either. You know, tradition and religion and society, culture, it's always changing and morphing and borrowing and exchanging, and it's a living thing. It's an organic thing. It's always moving, and so we have to always be able to step back and appreciate that, the way that it's always changing. Because if it's set in stone, there's a quote that I like by Richard Bach. He says, if heaven is perfection, then it's a swamp, and it will smell, you know. But our culture, our traditions, if truth is true, then it's going to change and be true for every generation. You know? So what was true for in the 13th century, it's still true today, but we have a different vantage point to look at it, because we've been through different experiences. We've changed. So the way that we look at it changes. But if we put down those eyes, it's the changeless as well. So what I'm saying is that in our ceremonies, and in that path, and in that road that I feel I'm cut from, it's been around for a very long time, and it's something that humanity can't not do without. And so we see a lot of people entertain and hold space for a lot of people who have religious trauma, who are spiritual but not religious, who are atheists, who are just, you know, curious. And I love that. I'm fine. I'm very happy with that. You know, I read a lot of atheist literature. I can walk in those rooms. You know, I'm not here to say this is right or that is wrong, and this is bad and this is good. But I'm holding out a space for people to find direct revelation and wisdom within themselves, and that's holding the space for truth to be there for each individual. And that's a rare thing. I think it's something that's very, very needed, especially in this day and age, because young people are rejecting traditional values, are moving away from, some rough-edged religious indoctrinations, and that's fine. But I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think what we get from those places is meaning. The faculty that we learn from that is virtue, and meaning, virtue. Without that, I don't know what we become. So I want to come from a place where you say impeccable. It's because there's a moral landscape, there's ethics, there's appreciation, there's wisdom, there's explanation, there's intelligence. But most of all, there's just love, and there's compassion to let people be who they are and let them, pollinate how they need to be. It's like you can't shape a flower the way you want it or make it turn a different color because you think it should be this color. You just let it be and appreciate it for who it is and what it is. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that we can give to people. And so I really foresee that, especially with the generations that are coming now, a revitalization of a syncretic religion that is more inclusive than exclusive. And that's what that feels good to me for the future and the future generations, to pray together in their own ways and to cross-pollinate and to cross boundaries and cross borders, because God doesn't fit into one religion, doesn't fit into one belief. God is infinite, therefore there are infinite ways to approach that. Reality is the same for everybody at the end of the day when we put down our life. And so if we remember our death, then we can remember our humanity.
It's really powerful. It's like one of the guys that sat with us was saying in the integration circle afterwards about the direct experience and what it does for each and every one of us, as opposed to just listening to a preacher and pastor, give you the word of God, finding God's voice, within yourself, within a ceremony, within each and every single moment, really. And that's one of the reasons why I think I'm always going to feel so called to the plant medicine path. And so let's talk about ayahuasca. I actually feel really bad. Me and Mark got in a fight, like just a little squirrel a few weeks before, and we're going back and forth, and I was like, you know what, I don't even need to say anything else. Ayahuasca is going to throw you around. Oh. And he said, I'm going to tell Jaya you said that.
So you did that to him, huh?
I said no after. I was like, ayahuasca is going to throw me around too. But it was just funny because the day after, he said that when you guys were talking, you used those same words, that you said that ayahuasca threw him around. And I was like, oh my God, is Jaya psychic? Oh, yeah. What is ayahuasca? Can you talk a little bit about both the cosmology, and I know that we don't maybe know where it started. I mean, we know it started in Peru, right?
Southern Ecuador, northern Peru. Okay. There's mythology, and I can't confirm mythology. I don't know for sure. One of the stories is that it came from the great Incan civilization, and it was used up there in the mountains where we were last year. But that's strange because that's far from the jungle. Anthropologically, historically, we trace it to southern Ecuador, northern Peru. And there is some other mythology of it being thousands of years old, which I can't confirm. people these days, they talk a lot about human remains being found in a cave, and there was a pouch, and there were several herbs in there that indicated the use of dimethyltryptamine and some other psychedelics, like a shamanic pouch, and which was like over 1,000 years old. I can't remember the thing, but historically, anthropologically, we have reason to believe that it's not that old. Like 200-300 years, but it could be older. The wild thing is that amongst such diverse array of species, flora and fauna in the Amazon basin, that they combined these two. One culture says that a medicine man had a dream, and the plants came to him and told him, and etc. I don't know. But it's like with any culture, there's probably a lot of trial and error, and they probably sampled all sorts of things. And if it was an accident, and a happy accident, or it was a kind of a prophecy foretold, I don't know. It's a mystery. And anytime human beings have been ingesting psychedelic substances, they've been walking the road of the mysteries. And that's in pretty much all continents and cultures. And so I'm a firm believer that the ingestion of substances is right there at the core of the beginning of civilization, of Western philosophy, of different revolutions inside of our mind.
Wow.
I think that it's a very natural thing. There's always a call for human beings to seek altered states of consciousness. And there are many ways to do that. There are very negative ways to do that, ways that are dangerous, addictive, and lead to us escaping from reality. And then there are ones that we stumble upon that lead us closer to reality. And those ones that lead us close to reality, like ayahuasca, they purge us of the things that want us to run away from reality. It's like I say, when it has the power to turn a light on, and when the light turns on, all of the shadows are exposed, and that can be really, really uncomfortable. It can be very enlightening, or it can kind of set the demons free, and they could cause more havoc. It's like you don't know.
Is that where the name Illumination, for the Illumination Retreat?
It's a good question. I don't know right now. I can't remember why we named it that. But yeah, it's an illuminating process. It's shining a light in dark areas. It's being a light in the darkness. It's illuminating. Need more illumination.
Yeah.
But ayahuasca, I guess, your question, it's the synthesis of two plants, a vine, kapi, jagubi, and a leaf, chakruna, chakrona, chakrupanga. And there's different variations of that. There are like 150 different species of vine alone, more than that. One thing I like to share as an informative viewpoint, that majority of people around the world, they have different entry points into these things. Ayahuasca has become such a popular thing. Everybody's, expert on it these days, but I think we need to be very humble, go very, very slow with what we think we know. For example, a lot of people, they assume that it's a DMT beverage, DMT being was being coined the spirit molecule, really potent, visual, psychoactive. And it was coined that, around the 1980s with Terence McKenna going down to Peru and things like this. But if we take it back further, or if we look at some other cultures using it in the north of Peru and South Ecuador, and the way that they're using it, if we speak to some elders, some ayahuascas, they say it's not the case. They say it's not actually a DMT brew. It's not about DMT. It's about the vine, the ayahuasca, and the alkaloids in that is the wisdom and the healing property. And in fact, there are cultures, and we historically know of cultures that still do and didn't used to add the leaf. And it's just a vine only brew. And that's a whole other area of discovery of just vine only. I like, it's been put that the leaf is like turning the lights on so that you have light to read the story, read the book, read the wisdom that is the vine.
Wow.
And so I think it's really nice just to step back from the things that we think that we are going down. A lot of people, they come for the vision, and they think it's all about this and that. But for some curanderos, it's not about visions. It's about what you learn along the way. It's not about having big experiences. It's about applying yourself.
Mm.
And in the same sense, I always bring up the point that there are so many disagreements. People think that this is the right way and this is how it should be done. And you go on these forums online and everybody's an expert saying this is this and this is that and this is what you do and this is what you eat and this is what you don't eat.
Mm-hmm.
But in South America, what somebody says on one side of the Amazon River, they say like this is exactly how it is on the other side. They say no way, we do it the opposite way. And what one person says, one group, they say you can't do this. The other one says, of course we do that all the time. And so there are not a lot of rules, not as many as people think, but the rules are still important. It's still good to respect where you're coming from,
mm-hmm.
or what you're learning, or what is being taught or shown to you in the group you're with, or the person that you are drinking from. You obviously need to trust them with something.
Mm.
And the other thing is, for example, a lot of Westerners, we say it's the mother. They say there's this feminine energy and this feminine spirit, and we call it la madre or abuela, the mother or the grandmother. And then just to break that and give us some more fluidity, to not be so attached to our ideas. The truth is, in Colombia and parts of Brazil, they call it taita, they call it the king, and they call it a masculine force, daime. And so who's wrong and who's right?
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
What I say is that if traditional leaders are approaching it with a symbol of it being a mother, a father, a grandparent, grandmother, or grandfather, then that encourages us to have respect for our elders, and respect to those who have been before us, who have more experience. Sometimes you drink ayahuasca, it knows you better than you know yourself, and you have to, there's no place to hide then. What do? You can't hide in the light. So respect, then not being able to hide, reverence, to revere something that is powerful. It's a force. Respect, reverence, and sincerity, because if you're coming up against that force, you've got to be very, very sincere. You have to learn how. Most of the ayahuasca cultures, they pray. A lot of people who don't know how to pray, they come and they say, I learned how to pray. Say, good, I didn't have to teach you. You figured that out yourself. Yeah. That's how they do it. You have to learn what that is for you. And then humility to humble yourself. And so I often say that the first lesson is to put down our opinions, to put down our ideas of what it is and what we think it is, because that space in our mind that wants to be an expert, wants to compare, and wants to be the best of this, that's kind of what we're purging. Mm-hmm. That's what we're purifying. And like I said, we are drinking the mysteries and walking the road of the mystery, which means we also have to let go of the thing that wants to know and be known by the unknown, which is very challenging because a lot of people have trouble letting go of control.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the most interesting things for me at the illumination retreat, going back to that, sitting with the medicine those first couple of nights. I really had to give up control, surrender, and just trust that the medicine was working through my body. And it's interesting how it works like that. Like it feels like all of these like little doctors. Mm-hmm. It feels like all of these little like almost like an ant colony, how it's like working for the queen. Like it feels like it's working like that. And it's so interesting because it's working, on all of these little parts of my physical body, but then also my energetic body, and also my, like, all of these, just in this quantum crazy way. And it's so interesting also how, for me at least, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I know it must be true for a lot of people. Whenever I drink ayahuasca or take mushrooms, or have sat in ceremony with peyote, wachuma, the plants point towards the light. They point towards this spirit of goodness in the world, that sometimes we lose sight of. What do you think about that?
I like to encourage that you're right and put that message out in the world, but it's not always the case. It's a it's an infinite ocean out there. I like to think that the light is very, very strong and that everything is pointing towards the light, and that is a belief one can have, or a realization that one can have, or a pulling, a drawing towards something that one can have, a revelation. Things can also breed in the darkness. It's like it has somewhat of a moral landscape to pull us in line, but it can also be used and abused. Something that Westerners are not so savvy with in some indigenous cultures in South America. It's used for not just healing. It's used for divination. It's used for sorcery. They used to use it before fighting, before hunting, before battle. They used to use it to divine the outcome of the battle, to give them strength. They used to use it to put themselves in a state of communion with nature so that they could have a one-up on the animals that they were hunting. In the jungle, it's about survival. And so the thing that Westerners come with, our ideals, what we think healing is, if you're living day to day, fending for yourself in the jungle, you have a different perspective on what this is and what life is. And so, a lot of the time it meets us where we're at. We could say that ayahuasca or plant medicines in general, they're like a university. And one of my friends in the peyote world in Mexico, he says that it's like a university, but you never graduate. But you can study all different types of things. So a lot of people who are new to it and naive, they think, it's about healing and it's about, it's about cleaning and purging and eating well and da-da-da. No, maybe if you want it to be like that, if that's your study, if that's what you're going there to learn. Some people in cultures they are drinking ayahuasca since they're children, and in going through those things, and they turn out to be musicians. They turn out to be healers. They turn out just to be regular people doing their own thing, and they'll just do that when they need to. It can bring out latent things in people, but so whole communities can drink ayahuasca, but not everyone in those communities needs to be somebody who works in and with the ayahuasca. You can major in a lot of different things.
It's funny, it reminds me of one of my other teachers who his whole thing is teaching about the history of psychedelics in Africa, particularly mushrooms. And we were doing a podcast this one time, and I said, everything in the universe is all about love. And he's like, yeah, that's one way to look at it, but I see it more as everything is information. It's like a big, massive, living, breathing Akashic record. I do like tethering myself to love. And the first time I heard it was in some documentary that I was watching on Jaya, but they were talking about how it was this thing, not like saying that there's no God like an atheist, but this thing that's like wants us to pray to it, but it's not God. It's like this force, like this anti-force or something. But then I've heard different iterations of this. Some of the first people, or not people, but beings that came here, kind of planted humans here, and just to like mine gold, or I don't know, do something that they needed for their planet. And they put this little worship, this thing in us that wants to worship in our minds. Have you ever heard that before?
Iterations, not the worship part.
Yeah, this thing in us that wants to pray to something so that we don't essentially get too out of hand or something like that. And that actually really scared me. So,
like describing parasitic kind of forces. And in these worlds, some people use the word shamanic, which I guess lacks some definition these days. But there's a play of power. And so when we are playing with power, it can corrupt us, it can liberate us, it can limit us, it can direct us, it can misdirect us. Power is it's a force. And so a lot of people playing in shamanic worlds get caught up in the play of power, and that feeds the ego and can be misdirected, without us really knowing, even though we think that it is going in a good way. Which is why I come back to the contemplative side, to the syncretic, like the religious side of where you're directed in the beginning, like who you are, what is your faith, and where is your sight. Because if you're being directed by powers, it's good to know what the source of power is. If you don't know what the source of power is, then you can be led by all sorts of powers that are not necessarily good or bad. But if you know, the biggest iteration of power, like what I was saying the other night is like love, light. We can't say them enough that they become cliche. Even if we think that love and light is cliche, like at the root of it, that is it. And so when I spoke about unshakable faith in the presence of love, unshakable faith in the presence of light, that is one of the most sincere prayers that I think we can make of ourselves. So Mr. Irineu, the founder of the Santo Daime, the Church of Ayahuasca in Brazil, when he was from the poor north of Brazil and found himself in the rubber tapping industry in Brazil, he was very dissatisfied, not good living conditions.
Rubber tapping is very rough.
Yeah, this is like 1920s, 1930s Brazil. It was basically slave labor. He was like a big 7-foot man with really, really dark skin, like African descent. And when he was in such a state of dissatisfaction, he came from a good, somewhat like a religious upbringing that I know of. And one of his friends said, there's this thing, that the indigenous are doing, over by the border, and it calls demons and they can ask, make wishes for what they want. And he thought, well, that's dangerous. You don't want to do that thing. Mm-hmm. But he was at his wit's end, and he's like, well, I've tried, on my path to God all this time, and I'm here. And it's, still not that great. So let's go do the thing. He thought he was crossing the line into evil territory to go and sell part of his soul so that he could have some satisfaction in life. And he went there and he drank ayahuasca, and luckily for him, he was received by his religious devotional vision of the Divine Mother, who restored him back to light, gave him a mission, and put him back in his place as a child of God, and fixed himself to the light. He said, dame fuerza, dame amor, dame luz, give me strength, give me love, give me light. Because he found that drinking ayahuasca, it would answer your prayers. But a lot of people go in there with, we have pride and prejudice and we have conceit and deceit, and so that can inflame different parts of us. And so I really, really admire Santo Daime. Is very, very meaningful to me because the purity in it is unbreakable. It's profound, to go, it's kind of like putting yourself out there in this wide open astral ocean. What do you do? What do you pray for? You say you tether yourself to love. I say, sure, if your teacher says everything is information, sure. But if you tether yourself to love, I say, for sure, that's a much better route. No, I don't want to dive into a sea of information. That's great. What I want to dive in with my tether to love, so I know where to go, where to come back to, where my aim is, what my direction is. I want to see the wisdom of the highest, of the most direct, prominent thing in my heart that that is close and near and dear and always been there. Because like I said before, it's the danger is only in the suburbs. I want to get close. The mysticism, the path of the mystic is to get as close as possible to that. So we always must tether ourselves to that. if that is our study, if your study wants to be about all of the information and intersections and, going through conspiracies of how human beings are put here to worship demons, then you can go and study that, but that doesn't serve me. I'm going to put my study, in the light and put my study in the light, because that is the age-old thing as well that you described. It's this parasitic force that there is a craving in us, and when we are in craving, we could say that there are other energies with us that are also in craving, that they are not fully finished or complete, and there's one worldview that souls, when they pass over, who didn't fully relinquish this life, they stay on there like suffering spirits, and they are playing out their old roles and habits, addictions. And so when people are playing out those roles, habits, and addictions, quite often, it could be a belief to some that they are not alone in that there are other forces acting on top of that. And so there might be these forces at play, and it looks at what is feeding you and what is feeding off you. And that's always a question that we can ask in our day-to-day reality. Even when it comes to our phone or just the regular distractions, all these things that feed off us and feed on our attention. And then there's just the aspect to reclaim our attention, to reclaim our awareness. Because reclaiming our attention and awareness is back how we were talking before, is the quality of contentment and peace in this moment. So I don't really care for the conversation of what these forces are, or the conspiratorial nature of it all, but more to the point of what my study is, and my study is in the things that feed me and where the truth is. And so
I've had this feeling for a while, really this gnosis, that the soul is something that doesn't die. And we always talk about how energy can not be created or destroyed, it just is. And I think about different things that I've read about how different traditions go into these initiatory states and psychedelic states to kind of practice for death sometimes. And the book of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And, just I spent a lot of time thinking about what is going to happen when we die. And yeah, over the past couple of years, I've started to take on this feeling of, and it's not just a feeling, I think that there's a lot of different traditions that maybe believe the same thing, but it's this thing of everything that we do in this life matters. And we're doing soul work, and whether or not that ties into reincarnation and if we graduate from Earth School, where we if you know that will tell us where we go next. I don't really know, but I do feel like the work that we do in this life matters, and if we want to die in a good way, we have to live in a good way. And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, but I also wonder if you could say maybe just a couple of lines or the whole thing of that poem from Ceremony that came to you. You know what I'm talking about? It came to you from your friend who passed while you were in ceremony.
I felt the presence of the stars. They shook me and they took me high. And I saw the world far down below, all of the troubles and all of the gold. I felt the presence of the stars. They shook me and they brought me here. I saw the world of illusion illumined by the light behind the veil. I felt the presence of the stars. They shook me and they took me away. I saw the world filled with light, and that is now guiding my way. Yeah, so this song inside of my head, the morning of the passing of a teacher in one of the lineages that I follow. and describes, that passing. It's a mystery to me, that one. You mentioned the Tibetan book of the dead, and so the bardos, something I just want to make simple, and it's a nice contemplation to think about. One of the ways of moving through bardo, there are different bardo states, like these in-between states that we can be in, between life and death, and bardos in different between states of mind and being. But one of them is that at the time of death, the 5 elements that make up who we are, not to mention aggregates and other different faculties, but on a really foundational level, we could just think of the 5 elements. And so as death approaches, it's like first the earth element starts to recede, the solidity, the stability. And once that recedes, then we go to the water element, and the water starts to dry up. We start to become dry, like in our veins in our body, in our fluids. Then the fire element starts to burn up any left of the moisture in the body. And it's really interesting to go through the bardos, because you go through the physical process of dying, like in meditative states, to prepare yourself to find out what is there. It's also a contemplation, because once after the fire is withdrawn, then you receive the air element. Like the last thing we do is we breathe out. So the wind, like the breath of life, the tangible, or not tangible, the animating force inside of us, the spirit leaves. And then the 5th element there is space. And so earth turns into water, water into the fire into the air, into the smoke. And then the air element transforms into space. And the final part of one of those bardo states in dying is space transforms or returns or recedes into space. And that's in some ways, some people could say that meditation is practice of dying, is the practice of retreating the mind back to that original nature, the original space, and resting in that place. Because all of the other turbulent factors, knots, ideas, opinions, stories that we get trapped in, they have us bound, they have us locked. And part of those traditions are liberation, our freedom, our realization and enlightenment as to what the truth is. And the truth is that it was always behind all of those knots. It was the space that returned to itself. It wasn't in all of the binding of all of the elements. The binding of the elements were what created the form and the matter and the story. And so I just like that, because I feel, to me, in that pointing out, there's some peace in that you go through all of these things of the process of dying, and then this space is there, and then it lands upon itself. And what space? It lands on space. And what is light? It lands on light. So you go back to that place that you can't get behind. And from that place that you can't go back any further, here and now, then you go forward, and you see that everything is dancing on that space. Everything exists of that space. Everything is actually made of that space. That's the spacious quality I was mentioning earlier. And so to me, I like to contemplate that, because one day I'm going to have to do that for real. It's the unbinding of elements, the unbinding of knots. I think I forgot the other part of your question. I was hooked on that part.
No, I forgot it too. I think I just asked you to touch on death and dying and
the soul level of things mattering. So when you go to that space, it's the deathless. The timeless is the deathless. The deathless is the birthless. And I like that contemplation as well, that who you were before you were born was the unborn. Like, where were you? In the Zen tradition, which I started out, one of my first pods, they say, show me your original face, the face that you had before the birth of your parents. So they say, before you were born, you were unborn. And after you die, you will be the deathless. And so this here and now is we tend to think of the intermediary state being what happens after death. But if we zoom out, we could say, actually, life is the intermediary state of the eternal.
Wow.
And what we embody here is, we think it is permanent, but it's not. And so when we have mystical states of experience or psychedelic experience or near-death experiences, quite often people come back with a lot of calmness and tranquility and said, I thought this was my home, but there's a bigger home that is beyond all of this, that is behind all of this, the light behind the veil. Illuminating the world of illusion is the light of truth. And so I don't know about, an eternal soul or the path, the transmigration of souls and rebirth and all those things. I can't say for sure. But I think sometimes if we are, still bound up and wound up in our identities, then those things continue after death. And that is, part of some traditions' idea of the cycle of rebirth. And that is an endless cycle until we wake up from that and find liberation. But peace in death is peace in life. And so I feel like most like sages on the path, they came to where they're at because they confronted death. And it pointed them back towards the light, and it pointed them right towards this moment, and it pointed them towards the preciousness and the fragility of life. And so the contemplation of death, it seems morbid, but it's actually coming more alive. Because until we come there, we think we are alive, but really we're running away from death. And it's something we have to reconcile. Coming close to that thing, it builds us, builds our character, gives us a more robust compassion for the suffering of others as well, because you see the human condition. Again, it's the zooming out and seeing a bigger picture. But ultimately, it's about finding peace. Do I need to know what happens after? I don't know. I don't think so. But when we say rest, may they rest in peace, may you rest in peace, I really feel that this shouldn't be saved for the dead. I feel like we should give this to everybody we meet. We should give it to ourselves while we are alive, to rest in peace. And that's really what we're talking about. Again, the ability to rest in peace and not be so addicted to running around incessantly on the treadmill looking for something, looking for peace everywhere else, because people will ask, they'll hope that in death we found it. So I hope that we find it in life, really.
Wow. One of the last things that I wanted to touch on, not the last. It's two more things. I feel like we got to talk about the illumination retreat. This will be the first year you guys aren't doing it in 10 years, you said?
No, I've been working down there for the last 10 years, but the illumination retreat was the third year when you joined.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. How did it come to be?
Well, as I said, I've been working down in the Andes of Peru for 10 years, and we have a nice community there. We have lots of friends come and go, and it's changed a lot. The whole scene down there has changed a lot, but it was quite impactful. It was a really beautiful place. It's a second home for us, and I always love going there. I used to teach yoga teacher trainings a lot, and that was one of the locations where I would teach a 300-hour, like an advanced course for teachers or people learning to teach. And I think I was preparing to have my second child, and it was no longer fitting or valuable or a good idea to be away for 30 days, intensely teaching all day and night while I was preparing for a second child. And so I really assessed, where I was at in my life, what I wanted to do, and how to incorporate a family, and teaching for 30 days just wasn't it. We were doing other things. We were holding ceremonies in our lounge room, etc. But retiring from teaching yoga was, I still teach yoga. I just don't teach teacher trainings, and I don't teach asana. To me, I teach the bigger yoga, the deeper yoga, which is bhakti, jnana yoga, the communion of one's mind, the resting in the realization of truth. You know? I think of yoga as like most Westerns come at it from physical practice. All that physical practice, it's moving into and towards stillness. And so the deeper you go, the more that becomes the practice. It becomes an internal practice, not an outward practice. And so right from the beginning, my path, even though I had a vigorous external practice, the real practice is the inward path. It's not what it looks like on the outside. It's not in the feathers and beads and the back bends. It's the inward path. Anyway, giving up that was really wonderful for me and my family, my wife and the kids. And we were doing the sound course here. We had the yoga forest. We were doing our little ceremonies and retreats here and there. But I didn't want to give up going to Peru every year. And so we have good relations there. We have beautiful things set up. And so we kept those things set up. We've got a really beautiful relationship with the retreat center where we've been going for many years. Different friends in the place. And it's just really about our connection to those mountains and to those places and the pilgrimage that we go there and the places we walk and the way that we go and the way that we see. And inviting people to come and deepen the forest path work. You know, it's all it is really. It's just more time involved in the nature of our work and how that unfolds. What's really cool about our time in Peru for me is, as you see, most of our retreats and ceremonies, more than half of the group really knows our work and has been with us before. And when we go down to Peru, there's nobody that doesn't know us and our work. It's like, you know, invite only. Like you have to, not invite only, but you have to have been to some things before. And so we get there, it's just a family reunion. It's like Christmas for me. Everybody comes together and we know everybody knows us. And if people there don't know each other, they do now. And so there's no building like the trust, there's no breaking the ice. We just jump in. Everybody knows what they're there for. They know what we do. So now we deepen the forest path. And a big part of it for me was inviting people to see this beautiful part of the world, to go up into the mountains, to go high into the mountains, to bring in some of our friends to come and play for us down there. And we've got people that come every single year. It's become a really big thing. But now we're spending more time in Australia towards the education of our children in Australia, which means this year we're taking a year off because we have a very full calendar, but it will return next year.
Yay! That was the most special thing I've ever done. It was incredible, really. And it's so funny how you call it the illumination retreat. There was so many different levels of that illumination. It's funny, I was talking to Mark, like probably the morning after the first ceremony, and I was like, isn't it crazy how you just wake up and gotta look everybody in the face? Like you can't hide. You gotta like, you see everybody after all of that you just, you know. But it's like that, like you just want to hide after everything that, you know, you went through, but you can't. But there's a part of that that's like, it's beautiful because when you can't hide, you're just being called forward to be seen and to see different parts of yourself. And that's what happened for me in that place, you know. And I know that's not what this is about. But the ways that my life has transformed after that retreat, I mean, it's like tangible. It's like, you know, like the same thing that I was talking about with the spirituality that's all like, woo, it's floaty and whatever. I've been doing that for so long and it wasn't working. And it was, it was like a real realization for me to come to after listening to Abraham Hicks every single morning and being like, everything is working out for me. And then looking around at my life and being like, well, everything's not really working out for me, you know? And then sitting with that and being like, well, what does this mean? Where do I go from here? And going all the way down, into just, I don't want to say just suffering. That sounds so like intense. Life was still pretty good, but it really was like a challenging couple of years for me. trying out different things and just being led to sitting in Peru and having that experience with you guys and that experience with the medicine and all of the healing that transpired and like feeling it happen and having that like gnosis, not even like something in my mind, but just like this feeling of expansion and illumination, and then seeing it ripple out in and throughout my life afterwards. It's just been so incredible and so powerful. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. The illumination is like a refinement process, you know, and it's, you say, it was what I feel like I've seen a lot of people, you know, we run around really looking for something to take us out of that suffering, which is a noble cause. You know, we're looking everywhere and we're trying things on with seeking and searching. We're restless, and in that restlessness, there's somewhat of an inability to accept or allow the suffering that's there, and like what, you know, to recognize this thing, because the way we're like trying to look the other way, we're trying to push it away, we're trying to say, you know, we brush it over with affirmations and
I'm not suffering. This is fine.
yeah, trying to call something else in. You know, there's a joke, you know, like if somebody wanted to become an astrophysicist, they don't sit there looking at the moon saying astrophysics. Like, it's not to say that those things don't work.
Right,
but, again, it's the sober spirituality, the grounded approach. And like you described, you know, being in the familial environment with us and with our participants, that there's something calling for you to be seen and to not hide. There's that's a big way that it works. You know, we our family have children. Like we represent like a mother and a father aspect, and a couple and kids and you know, extended family. And for that, that's deeply confronting for some people who have a lot of family issues. They start to resolve things. They start, you know, like, you know, project or reflect things of one of us or people in the group. But the nature of myself and Haley, like, we don't deal in drama, you know, so people also pick up on that, and things start to work out smoothly. And we don't deal in drama. We're not here to create a big story around things. We're just, you know, it's more of a stoic attitude, actually. But in that stoic attitude, there's a space to hold people in their emotionality, in whatever they're bringing, you know, to let them bloom and to let their fragrance exude, their, like as a flower or a plant in the garden. And in that acceptance and that allowance, you know, people, you know, bloom. They change. They come out of their shell. Because we're not saying, you know, you have to do it like this, or we're not saying this is bad, or, you know, oh yeah, you have to get rid of that suffering before you're here. And you're right, you should have run around everywhere until you found the thing. So like, no, we're here now, and that's good, and everything here is welcome, and there it is. And then you kind of hit rock bottom. You know, you fall from the clouds and of your affirmations, and you think, okay, now I'm here, and here's what I'm holding. And there's a truth to that. And you're not trying to bypass something, you're not trying to get somewhere. That's a really, really wonderful teaching. That's why I say sobering. It's like, it's not lost in the clouds, it's just right here. And now you can do something with it because you've accepted it. Like, transformation doesn't happen without love, without understanding, without acceptance. Yeah. And so that's a real gift that is given. There's a quote that I heard recently, which I really, really love. I don't know where it came from. It says, I have not come to heal you, I've come to love you, and love will heal you. And a big part when we hold our retreats, I think that's kind of it. We just get down, we do our work, and we work on people, and we do that. But at the end of the day, it's, you know, I'm not doing, it's doing. You know, when we open the work works, and when you do the work works on you, and we work for that work, and we work in that work, and we work in that light, and that's all there is to it. It's not really like, you know, I'm not Jaya special and he's doing the healing. Without him, I can't do it. It's like, no, we're all here and we're all carrying our stuff. And once we accept it and let it be And when we're, we learn by osmosis and by lifting each other up and reflecting and role modeling. And that's really healthy. I think that's just nice.
Yeah.
You don't have to drink the Kool-Aid. You don't have to follow the leader. You don't have to believe what we believe. But you can come and there's a good thing there.
Yeah.
Simple thing.
You guys are incredible. And I agree with everything that you said, except for that you're not special, because you definitely are. And I'm so grateful, that we're doing this, and that this will live on forever through time and make its ripples in the universe. And that you're making your ripples throughout the universe, and that your way found my way, and it's really beautiful. So thank you so much for your wisdom, for your teachings, for your sharing, for your jokes. It's funny you call it like sober spirituality, and like you're like, we have a stoic way about it. And it's so funny. You could do stand-up actually, but
it's all just a guise, so people have to listen to my joke.
Thank you so much, Jaya. Thank you for entering the wolf portal. Thank you for everything else. And do you have any final words for the portal for our listeners who are in this space of listening?
Well, thank you for planting the seed. For our listeners in the space of listening, I guess it's only fitting to come back to that and end where we began. And to really remember the transmission of presence is the real being. And it's not a being, it's not being something, it's not getting someone, it's not being someone else, it's just resting in that pure primordial place before all that is, before the light. Just to rest in that, to receive the quality that we each have inside of us, that is presence, that can be accessed through deep listening. Because that's a real purifying force. And we think we have to go down to the jungle and do this and take this and practice here and find this teacher. But if we are able even just to bathe in just pure, radiant, simple presence, the undertone of our being, just for a few minutes, that's like a robust, warm shower, a bath that can really soothe the mind. And right now I think we need as much soothing and healing balms for the human mind as we can get. Because it's such a fragile and beautiful place. And we think that it causes us so much havoc. But really, if we enter into this presence and we look at our mind, we see that it's also full of pristine, spacious presence. And that the mind, from the very beginning, its nature has been pure presence. And that it's not the problem. The problem is when we attach ourselves and when we believe all of the things that wander through the mind. That's when we fall from grace. But if we see the space around everything that enters into the inner world, then we start to walk the inner path of presence and beauty, the inner path of forgiveness and compassion that leads to peace, that leads to love. So it begins just with dropping it all into the practice of presence.
Thank you. And thanks for watching.